Hello, everyone, and welcome to Faith, Family, and Financial Prosperity Workshop. My name is Wambui Gaitha, and I am the founder and CEO of Regal Africa. And Regal Africa was created in 2015, and it's all about creating wealth. And the reason we thought it best to start this workshop is really to show people that even in times of crisis right now, where we're all fearful about the future, we need to have faith about and know that God is going to be able to enable us to actually have financial prosperity, and it all depends on our family. So we start off with that. I would like to talk, get a verse from the Bible, Ecclesiastes 5:19, which says that wealth is a gift of God. So what it says is, moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possession and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his loss and be happy to his work, this is a gift of God. All right. So today we'll be talking about faith, family, and financial prosperity. And whenever we talk about faith, we're saying faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And we can see this in the Bible in Hebrews 11:1. So we don't know about the future, but we all have to have faith that whatever we hope for will happen in the future. And the key about family, which is the middle part that I believe is the core part of financial prosperity, is our family is the circle of strength founded on faith, joined in love, kept by God together forever. During when you're living or when you pass away, family will always be family. And in regards to financial prosperity is basically financial blessings from God. So if you have the faith and you work together with family, I do believe that you will all have financial prosperity. All right, give me a moment. I'm not too sure why it's not moving. All right, so today our agenda is basically what we are going to be talking about. What does God say about wealth? And so what does the word of God say about wealth? What is written in the Bible about wealth? And what does faith have to do with creating wealth? We'll also be talking about what does my family have to do with creating wealth? And how can I achieve financial prosperity that we all pray for and we all desire? All right, so when I talk to people about faith, family, and financial prosperity, I always say it starts with you, right? So what is your purpose? Because what your purpose is and what your assignment is where you will find that value. And if you've read The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, it will actually tell you that when you have a purpose-driven life, when you actually know what God has called you to do, you're going to do it with passion, you're going to do it very deliberately, and you will always have to do what you need to do to achieve that which has been assigned to do. And for me personally, as Wambui Gaitha, my passion is to help others by sharing financial knowledge. And because I believe this is my purpose and what I'm called to do, I believe that I need to do whatever I have to do the Great Commission in the marketplace. So my mission constantly is, how do I transform families? And that's why we're talking about faith, family, and financial prosperity today. And I'm always thinking about, how do I transform communities? Because if you're able to transform families, then you can transform communities. And then ultimately, is how do you impact the nations? And Jesus Christ does tell us this about the Great Commission, that you need to go out there and do good work around the world. So I say, because I know my purpose, I know what my assignment is, I'm always working towards that, and that I believe is what's going to help me create wealth. And so my question for you today is, what is your purpose? what is your assignment, because whatever that is where your financial prosperity will happen. Now, for you to create wealth, it has to be very practical. So this workshop is really about how to use biblical principles to actually help you achieve wealth creation, right? And I always say that in order for you to create wealth, you really need to start with the wealth formula, which is basically the secrets of the wealthy. And it all goes back to three things. But before I talk about those three things, I really wanted to quote this, which is on 1 Corinthians 2:15, which says, your faith should not be in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. So I can talk to you, I can share with you, many wealth advisors will tell you about wealth, but I believe is that when you go to the Word of God and you read it, you will be able to actually see the wisdom that is in this book, and then you can actually use it in your life to create financial prosperity for you and your family. So in regards to the wealth formula, which is the secrets of the wealthy, the first thing is really about the wealth mindset. You have to think abundance. It's actually in the Bible where God talks about abundance, right? We as Christians or we as believers should not be thinking about lack. You always have to believe that there's enough of that. God will provide and we can all be wealthy. And being wealthy just means you actually have to have financial net worth, positive and passive income generation, which just means you always have to own more than you owe. It's even in the Bible where God detests about debt. So you really need to be very careful about the kind of debt that you accumulate, but really focus on how do you accumulate assets. And as we go through the workshop, I will talk more about that. But the key here about having a wealthy mindset is to have a vision of abundance, have a vision of how your life you want it to be, and have faith that it will happen. And once you have the vision, and you believe that it will happen, then you start working towards that vision. And I believe God will then be able to give you that, the will of your life. The second thing that you need to do is wealth planning. And we'll be talking a little bit about the wealth book. So ensuring that you have a financial plan is critical because you need to know where you are and where you want to be. God is a God of order, I always say, and God is a planner. So if you do not have a plan of your life, how do you know when you've actually achieved that which you want to achieve? So for you to be wealthy, you need to first have a wealthy mindset, then you need to have a wealth plan. And then the third thing is actually execution of your wealth plan, which is wealth accumulation. I always tell people that wealth is grown incrementally. So I'm not here going to tell you how to get rich in 6 months or in 3 months, but what we'll be talking about is really wealth. How do you grow it incrementally? And I also say for you to be able to grow wealth incrementally, you have to put aside a percentage of your income and profit every time you make money, and then you want to make compound interest do its magic. And I'll be showing you a little bit about that and how just the little you have, once you put it aside, you will be able to generate a lot. And this is actually talked about in the Bible when you talk about working and planning and creating wealth. If you look at Proverbs 6:6-11, it really talks about the wisdom of the ant. The ant is such a small insect, and yet it knows the seasons of life. It knows when to accumulate, it knows when to store, and it knows when to use. So if you look at an ant, it's always busy because it knows that the season will change. The season from abundance to the desert season, which right now we're seeing, especially in times of COVID, he always knows that things will not always be plentiful. But for you to be wealthy, you need to always know what you need to do. And you always have to be diligent. You always have to be disciplined. And you always have to be acquiring and storing and growing, because there'll be a time when you cannot do that and you need to go back to your results. In fact, when you talk about the story of Joseph in Genesis 41, Joseph was in the Pharaoh's palace, and Pharaoh had this dream about, these 7 cows, and there were all these healthy cows, really good. And then you see a vision of the dream of seven skinny cows, and yet the skinny cows ate the big and healthy fat cows. And he was really trying to understand what this dream was. And God talked to Joseph, and Joseph just basically told him what it was. And really what Joseph was brought to do in the Pharaoh's palace was really to prepare them for famine, right? So it was about there was going to be 7 years of prosperity and abundance and 7 years of famine. And the reason why this is important when you're talking about wealth is because you need to realize when you have surplus, you need to be able to do things with it. You're not supposed to spend all of it. You need to be able to keep that, use that, store that. So at the time when there is famine, then you have some results that you can be able to go back into. And that is why God is always talking about creating generational wealth, because you cannot spend everything that you create. That is not the right way to do it. And that is how poverty comes to a lot of people, because everything people make, they spend. So if one thing I really need you to remember is that for you to be wealthy, for you to have financial prosperity, you need to have a wealthy mindset. You have to have faith that it will happen. You need to have a plan for your wealth, and then you need to have wealth accumulation. You're constantly growing your wealth. And then I like this verse in the Bible in Matthew 21:22, and it says, and whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. Again, if you look at this, the key here is prayer. So you're asking of the Lord. So if you ask of the Lord and you have faith, then you will receive. A lot of us don't ask. And when you ask, you have to be very specific in what you're asking for, right? You cannot say, I just want to be rich. I want to be wealthy. Again, what does that look like, right? So even when you're praying, I believe that you have to be very specific in your prayer, and that way you'll have faith that this is actually what's going to be happening, because you actually have set it down and you've actually said, this is what I am praying for. So when you're looking to have financial prosperity, you actually have to pray about it, and you have to have faith that it will happen. It will not most likely happen right away, but if you take the right steps, then you will get to that. And that's what I always talk about, the financial journey. It's a journey of faith, right? It's a journey of faith. We talked about faith earlier. You don't know what the future holds. You just have faith that it's going to happen. So this is a journey. And so for me, I will say financial prosperity equals financial freedom, because you'll know you are financially prosperous or you're wealthy when you're financially free, when you can be able to do whatever you want to do, right? And the only time you can be able to do whatever you want to do in this life is because you have accumulated that wealth that I talked earlier, which requires discipline. And so for you, when you're on this financial journey, when you're on this journey to create wealth, you actually have to have purpose, like we talked about. You actually have to have a plan, because then you're able to fulfill the mandate of God in your life. For me personally, the reason I'm able to do what I do is because I spent so many years working in corporate, so many years working around the world, and I got this knowledge and I made this money, and it reached a point when I believed I was ready to go out there and do God's work, which is what I'm doing right now, which is to help families, help communities, and eventually impact nations. And for people to understand, especially people in Africa, that we don't have to be poor. And I will be talking about how we can be able to help you and your family actually achieve financial prosperity. As a believer, I always say that we all have to tap into the wellness of abundance, which the Lord has promised us. It's been promised to us, so we know that we are going to achieve that. You have to actually tap into your God-given talents and impact the center of influence you have. I always say that your talents shine. People will tell you what it is that you're good at. So wherever your talents are is where your wealth will be found. And then you start impacting the center of influence, which starts with your family. Your family is the core unit, and then you grow to the community and eventually to nations. So that's why I always say family is very key, because if your family does not support you, yes, you can be financially prosperous, but it will be a lot more harder. And that's why I'm always talking just like you. If you want to have financial prosperity, you have to actually sit down with your family and I always say your immediate family, your extended family, and figure out how can we support each other on this journey of creating wealth. Because once you have a really great support system, then you can thrive. But doing it alone would be very hard. So you actually have to be very clear about your family. Some of your family members might not agree with you or might not support you. That's fine. Then we look at other families, right? Family is not only blood, it's the community that you're in. And with that, I always say, trust God for what you want, as all things for good, because God says all things will work out for good for those who love the Lord. Now we go in this a little bit more practical, and I believe I shared this with you, which is the Wealth Book e-workbook. It's a practical book that you do it yourself, which helps you understand your whole financial picture. For you to be able to be financially wealthy, right? Money in this case, you actually need to know where you are and where you want to go. And so I always tell people you have to start out with a wealth plan. You actually have to have a personal life wealth plan, whereby you have a strategic plan on how you'll be able to grow and manage your wealth. Because when you're doing this plan, you'll be able to come up with strategies yourself or with a wealth advisor, and then that will ensure that you actually achieve what you want to do. So with that, I would just go ahead and just go in and see if I'll go ahead and unmute for just a second so that I can be able to answer any questions that you may have. So first, I'll be able to let you unmute yourself, and we can talk a little bit about the workbook and see how that goes. So one moment, please. Participants. All right. So I see we have Wandai, Nyokabi, Nyambura, and Diana. I've gone ahead and asked to unmute you. So what I'd like here to know is if you actually went through the e-workbook and if you have any questions before I go on in regards to practically planning your wealth. I'll start off with Nyokabi. Hello, Nyokabi, how are you doing today?
Hello. I'm
good. Good morning.
I'm good. Yeah.
Great. So I believe you received the e-workbook. Did you get a chance to go through it and the 8 steps about creating wealth?
No, I didn't. Okay. I have not gone through the booklet.
Okay.
I didn't go through the booklet.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm planning on doing so after this session.
All right. Hopefully
Some
after
point
this workshop, you'll actually go in and do it, because it actually helps you write down your goals, because like I've mentioned, you actually have to have a vision of the life. God says that you actually, his plans are better than your plans, right? Are bigger, right? Like you don't know what God has in store for you. But if you have no plans, then, you know, what is God supposed to do, right? So that's actually the first step. So maybe Wandai, did you get a chance to go through the wealth plan, and do you have any questions?
Hi, Anne. I have not gone through it.
Okay.
But I will definitely do. You know, I am in this journey. I'm striving to do better. So I will definitely do.
All right. What about you, Diana? Did you get a chance to go through the wealth plan? And do you have any questions about that before I go in to continue about the 8 steps that I believe you need to create wealth?
I actually did have a chance, and oh my God, there was a lot to do, but I do actually have a question, and the question is around if you're starting out and you want to start to save more regularly, is there a certain percentage that you actually recommend to start, like you say 5% or 10% of your income, like, you know, when we retire 10% of whatever you you make, you know? So is there a particular percentage that you do recommend to start, or should be a goal that we should strive for to start saving on a regular basis?
Okay, that's a really good question. I always say in the Bible, it talks about 10% to God. And if you're giving to God, you should also give to yourself. So I usually recommend you give 10% towards a saving for yourself. That should be the minimum that you give yourself. So whatever income that you make, you give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So you pay the taxes that you have to pay, but then to God, you give 10%, yourself, you give 10. And then from there, which is the minimum, and then from there, you're able to then now use the remaining money to do what you need to do in regards to your life. And the 10% is the minimum, because that's what actually goes into actual savings. And I will actually go into that slide and just go through the 8 steps and maybe make it a little bit clear for you, so that we can do that. So if you look, current slide. If you look at the 8-step process that I believe is the right way to create wealth, the first thing, like I mentioned, is you actually have to understand where you are. So you actually have to do a financial net worth calculation. And a financial net worth calculation is just basically understanding your assets, which is what you own, and understanding your liabilities, which is what you owe, right? So the difference between what you owe and what you own is actually what your financial net worth is. So you always want to make sure you have a positive financial net worth. So if you own more than you owe, then you're fine. The problem happens is when you owe more than you own, and that means you're negative financial net worth, and so you are not able to actually achieve what you want to do, which means you cannot even leave an inheritance for your children, because basically you've eroded everything that you owe. So you own, sorry. So that's the first thing. The second thing is where, Diana, you're talking about savings. Cash flow management is very key. So when you're actually starting on your journey of creating wealth, you actually have to have what I call cash flow management. It's better than saying budgeting, which is the B word, but really it is budgeting. You actually have to understand, how much money am I making? How much money am I spending? And then actually being very practical about that. Like I say, if you actually know this is how much money I'm making, I'll just use simple terms. So you say I'm making 100,000, 10% 10,000 I give to God, to God's work, however that is to you. You know, that's a conversation with you and your God and whatever your beliefs are. And then you say 10% comes to me, right? Right. So then now you start off with savings. But I always talk about, and I will be talking about the difference between savings and investing. I always believe that you should not put money in a savings more than 3 or maximum 12 months of your monthly expenses, because then you're missing the point about creating wealth. So you will start saving and then you'll get into investment. The third thing is credit and debt management. This is very critical. Even the Bible talks about someone who owes is a slave to the person who lends. Yeah, the borrower is a slave to the lender, because when you borrow, you will always owe the person that has lent to you. And so you have to be wise around debt, because there's nobody wealthy who's actually made it without getting into debt, right? So you actually have to get the right debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. And I believe that the good debt is when you're actually getting debt to acquire an asset, right? If you're getting into debt to be able to buy a home or to buy land, or you're looking to actually grow your business, those are good debts, and you actually have to have a plan of how to pay it back. But any kind of debt that you get in regards to whereby you're just borrowing just for consumption, just to go and get a vacation, go buy clothes, things like that, that is not the right way. And you do not want to be a slave to somebody for frivolous things, right? So you want to be very careful about that. The fourth thing is about insurance planning. You always have to protect your assets. You have to protect your assets. You've worked very hard, you've acquired assets, you have to protect your assets. And when you talk about assets, it's what you value because it's what you own, right? So most people, when they think about insurance, they think about maybe car insurance, house insurance, but there's also life insurance, right? Because one of the things when you, and this is around family, especially if you have children, you never know what will happen in the future. Yes, we have faith that we'll live for many years and will live a great life, but you never know what God has in plan for you. So in situations like life insurance, especially if you have children, you actually have to be able to say, how much, if anything was to happen to me, if I was to pass away, I want to make sure that my children are protected. Remember, it goes back down to family. I have to make sure that even if I'm not there, they will still be able to live the life they would have lived if I was there. So then you start looking at how much money or insurance do I need to pay off all my debt? How much insurance or money will I need so that I can be able to take my children to school, give them a cushion to start life on? So when you're really talking about insurance planning, you really need to see what is it that I can do, and what products can I use that will help me and my family in this wealth creation journey. And then the fifth thing is tax planning. A lot of people don't understand the tax incentives that they can get that are given by government, right? So you really need to be able to talk to a tax advisor and say, look, what can I do? One of the things, for example, is maximum you can deduct out of paying tax, in this case in KRA, in Kenya, is 200. If you invest 240,000, which is 20,000 a month, into a pension that is through the Retirement Benefits Authority, you can deduct that when you're doing your taxes. All of you, your taxes are due by June 30th, right? And you know that you're paying taxes, which was usually 30% of your income, and then now has been reduced to 25. Or if you had capital gains and you had wealth, then it's usually 5%. But then now one of the tax planning incentives is you can actually deduct the pension, the money you're saving for retirement. You can deduct it when you're doing your taxes, so you pay less to government. So one of the things about creating wealth is about wealth knowledge, and it's about being wise. And I love the book of Proverbs because it always talks about wisdom. You have to be wise about it. So you actually gain the knowledge. Talk to people who've gone before you and know some of these things so that you can take advantage of them. The sixth thing is about retirement planning. We are all gonna grow old. It's just life. So what you want to do is you do not want to be a burden to your children, right? You want to be in a place whereby you're living this great lifestyle when you're young and when you're older. So you have to plan. God talks about planning. So you have to do that. The seventh step is really about wealth accumulation. This is where earlier mentioned to you is the secret of the wealthy. They are always accumulating wealth. And there are different investment options, which I'll talk later on in the program. And the last thing is estate planning. This is critical. And I'll give you a story later on about examples in the Bible where you see when somebody realized that they had reached the time when they will actually pass on to be with the Lord, they actually brought in their family and their children, and they told them, this is what I would like you to have, or this is what you need to do. So beforehand, they actually have planned that. So estate planning is very key. And if you look at the wealth book that you got during this preparation of this workshop, it actually tells you the different things that you can take, the different tools that you can do in regards to estate planning. So with this, what I will say after the workshop, just go in, look at that wealth book, e-workbook, go through these 8 steps. And by the time you finish your 8 steps, you'll be able to answer the critical question, which is, what is the vision for your life? What is your wealth vision? What do you want to achieve a year from now? What do you want to achieve 5 years from now? What do you want to achieve 20 years from now? Because once it's very clear what it is that you want to achieve within that time period, then now you can start taking the steps that you need to do to actually actualize that. My people perish from lack of knowledge. My people perish for lack of vision. So you have to start with the vision, with the knowledge, so that then you can thrive. Now, the same thing that you do individually, one of the things, and we'll be talking about that in the Bible, it really talks about business, right? So the same thing you do in your personal life, you also have to do that with your business, right? And I'm really talking about family business. I believe this is the season where I have been talking about family businesses more than anything, because I realized that family businesses can either prosper you or destroy you. But if you have good, great relationships with your family, then you will have a thriving family business. The question is, how do you do that? How do you manage your business? How do you separate it from personal feelings, right? Because especially when you're in family, how do you ensure there's continuity? What is the business succession plan? Because remember, in the Bible, it talks about inheritance. A good and wise man leaves an inheritance for the fourth generation. So how do you ensure that this business that you have started, or your family have started, or your parents started, or your grandparents, how do you ensure that there is a continuity plan? There's a business succession plan. So the key here for businesses, just like with individuals, is first also understanding your financial net worth. This is very easy because you can just look at the balance sheet. One of the things that you need to do is really track your business and track your business finances. So if you have your financial statements, it's very easy to look into your balance sheet and see, what are my assets, which is what I own? What are my liabilities? What it is that I owe. And then you can actually understand the financial net worth of your business. Now that is very simple and that's very accounting, but the balance sheet only tells you your assets and liability, but the value of your business could be a lot different than what you actually see as the total assets. And that's a conversation for another day. But when you're talking about business planning, you do the same thing. Financial net worth, you look at cash flow management. So you look at your profit and loss, understand your revenues, understand your expenses. How do I do things differently? Because for you to be prosperous in your business, for you to be prosperous in your family, you have to understand where you are and where you want to do. And the same thing happens. You have to make sure you understand your debt and manage it, have insurance, tax, retirement, especially if your family business and it's not like working in corporate where you have a pension, or you work in government. You actually have to do that yourself. And your retirement plan cannot be your business, because you cannot work forever. It will reach a time that you retire. So what are you doing in that time for retirement? Are you going to sell that business? Or are you going to leave that for your children? Or what is it that you will do with this business so that you can retire well? And also with your business, you need to be always accumulating assets, right? So you actually need to be growing the business. Are you buying other businesses, or are you diversifying your investments? And we'll talk a little bit about that. But the key at the end of it all is understanding, what is my business succession plan? And if you do not have a business succession plan, then you need to be understanding, what is your exit strategy? How are you going to exit this strategy? But if you want to leave an inheritance for your children, then you need to be able to understand, will you leave them the whole business, or will you sell part of the business and leave the other part for the children? Again, this is a very personal decision, which I believe the family needs to talk about, you need to pray about, and you need the right advisors to do that. So wealth planning is very key. And like I said, the Word of God talks about planning. And this is really good. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." The Lord says he has the plans. He knows the plans he has for you. And the plans are to prosper you, right? And there are different prosperity. There's financial prosperity, there's health. There's so many things, right, in regards to prosperity. But because I'm focused on what I call the business mountain, the wealth mountain, that is the area that I specialize in. So I talk about financial prosperity and creating wealth. He has plans for you. and the plans are to give you a hope and a future. And since we know that, then it's really great, it's really good then to understand what is the formula. What do I need to do so that I then become wealthy? So when you're creating wealth, which is what most people are doing, unless you come from a very wealthy family, so then you're inheriting wealth. And I always say, even if you're not inheriting wealth, you want to make sure that your children and your children's children are inheriting wealth. So there is a formula. The company that I started, Regal Africa, we came up with what we call the SBI formula, and it's the formula for creating wealth. So the first thing, anyone who starts to create wealth has to start making money. And the way to start making money is to have a salary. Either you go and become employed somewhere and you earn a salary, or you have a business and you're earning a salary. Because just because the business is doesn't mean you shouldn't earn from it, right? So the first step is to earn a salary. But a salary is just the wages that you're paid. You cannot become wealthy by earning a salary. So then you need to then go into business profits. Now, business profits are earned when you create value in the community, because people will buy what they value. Right? People will buy what it is that they value. And then the third thing is investment income. This is the returns from investing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So people always ask me, where do you start, right? I want to make this money. I want to be prosperous. Where do I start? I remember the story in the Bible of Moses when he was called and he was told to go to Egypt. And he's like, what should I do? What should I do? Will they listen? Will they know what it is that I'm saying? How will I know that I'm called by you? And what did the Lord tell him? What do you have in your hand? Right? And, you know, he looks in his hand, he had a rod, and it fell down, and he actually did what? It turned into a snake or a serpent. And he was told, when you go to the Pharaoh's palace, when you go to Egypt, you do the same thing. So the question is, I always tell people, start with what you have in your hand. Do you have talent? Do you have time? Do you have treasures, right? What is it that you have, right? In my case, what it is I am now looking, as I continue to create wealth, is to use my knowledge, to use my talent, to use my time, to use the money that I have accumulated over the years to be able to then continue to create wealth. So what do you have in your hand? What do you have in your hand? Don't start looking for things out there. What do you have in your hand? Do you have a computer? Okay. How do you start making money using that? Do you have social capital? How do you, so I'll be talking a little bit about that. So the question is, what do you have in your hand? What you have in your hand is where you start, and then you have a plan to prosper. The second thing is to ask for guidance. Earlier I talked about the story of Joseph in the Bible and what the Pharaoh saw in his dream. And every leader you know, and anyone who's being prosperous will always tell you they have advisors that they go to, or people that they can go to, and they pray about it, right? So the question is, who's your guidance, right? Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it wise people? Where do you start is for you asking for guidance from the right people. And I'm glad that you're here, because then you will probably get some information that will help you on your wealth creation journey as you reach financial prosperity. And the thing about it is, work towards the vision. And the way you work towards the vision is by starting with what you have in your hand, knowing where you want to go, and then you start on that financial journey. And remember that God has a plan for you, not to harm you, but to prosper you. All right. Now, this is something that I've been talking to everyone, especially about family, because I believe that when you're moving from faith to financial prosperity, the key is really family, right? And one of the things I've been telling everybody is your children cannot inherit your salary, right? They can inherit your job, but they can't inherit your salary, which means if the Lord says that you're supposed to leave an inheritance for your children, you cannot leave, a salary, a job. So the only thing you need to do is work on what can you leave your children as an inheritance. And that is where you will find financial prosperity. So when you look at the pyramid, and I just wanted to show this to you, you start off as an employee, but the highest place you can be is an investor, right? So are you working for somebody? You're able to make a salary. Most people then go in and they say they're in business, and then they become self-employed. I always tell people there's a difference between self-employed, business owner, and entrepreneur, and then investor, right? So you actually have to understand the difference about this, because you want to move from employee, where majority of the people are, to investor, where the top 1% of the world are. They are investors. But it is a process. It is a process. So you start from being employed to being self-employed to being a business owner, and then being an entrepreneur. So I mentioned that the key here is family for me, because it's not easy when you do it alone. I know. I run a business and it's not easy if you do it alone. And I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for my family that supports me. I believe that the family is the core unit that God created, where you have a bond, you know, blood bond, culture, you think together, you love one another, you spend time together, you have a relationship. And I believe that that family, which is the core unit, is where you start creating generational wealth, right? So family is very important on your journey to financial prosperity. And I'll talk about a little bit about Abraham's story and Isaac's inheritance, which is in Genesis. I always tell people, it's in the Bible. Abraham, where we are told he's the father of nations, he was in a family business. He was in agribusiness. He sold livestock, right? So he was in business. So there's this thing that business people are bad, business people make money, business people take advantage of people. No, business people are good. Most of them, if done right, right? Because they're providing a good and a service. And we see Abraham as being a business person. He had 318 employees, right? So he was not self-employed. He wasn't an employee. He was in business. And then as the story goes on in Genesis and we see what Abraham is doing, he moves from being just a business person, he becomes an investor. And how you see this is because you start seeing him talking about the money that he's made from his business, his livestock business. He's now buying silver and gold. He's buying land, right? Which tells you he realized that he needs to take his money out of his core business, his family business, and diversify into different things. And so whenever you're looking about wealth creation, you really need to understand, as I mentioned earlier, there's the salary, but there's business profit, and then there is investments. So whatever you make money out of your business, you now need to diversify and start putting into different asset classes: silver, gold, land, property. That is where you want to go. And this, like I said, it's in the Bible. It's in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. So we know that this is a system that was put in place that is somehow, that's how you're supposed to create wealth. The other thing I always talk to people about is really the story of King David. And if you look at that and the inheritance that he gave to Solomon, and inheritance doesn't necessarily always has to be money, although money is one thing. It's also wisdom, it's also knowledge, it's also blessings that you give to your children. And if you look at the story in Kings as it goes along, you start seeing that the descendants of David, even though they didn't do so well, God was always prospering them or giving them opportunity, because he would say he came from a descendant of David. And the reason I bring this up is wherever you are as a person who has children, whatever you do now will be a blessing to the future generations that you come from, right? And so this is how you see financial prosperity or prosperity happening in families, because of what you do right now. And I always talk to families and say, you know what? You need to stop the poverty cycle. You need to stop. It has to end with you. You need to teach your children when they're young. You need to show them that you're working. You need to start being in business. You need to start showing them that they're investing, because they learn and watch from you. personally, for me, I can tell you this. When I was growing up, my parents were working, but then I also saw them in business. So guess what? When I grew up, I was working and then I had my businesses. My parents were working and in business, but also investing. Okay. So when I grew up, what did I do? I work, I'm in business, and I'm investing. All right. Children learn from watching, not what you say, but by watching what you do. So when you're looking to go and you want financial prosperity with your family, when you're going to buy a property, when you're starting a business, are you taking your children with you? You need to take your children with you to your business. You want to take them when you're going to buy property or you're going to buy different assets. You take them with you so that they see this is how wealth is created. So when they get the inheritance, they will not stop. They'll continue doing what they learned when they were very, very young. So I always say this responsibility of wealth creation and stopping the poverty cycle starts with you. And the key here on family is husbands and wives need to be working together, right? You cannot do this alone. You and your husband have to work together. And I'm always saying, as parents, you need to be speaking wisdom and blessings to your children. Whenever they go out, speak wisdom, talk to them, show them so that they go the right way as God has told us to do, and then keep blessing them and continue supporting your family, friends, and the community business. I can tell you, for example, right now with what's happening in COVID, the reason we are going to continue seeing poverty happening is because no one is buying from other people. The only way poverty stops is if business happens, right? So if I don't buy from you and you don't buy from me, then guess what? Nobody buys from each other. Then guess what? None of us make money. So we always have to be supporting one another. And that is what I have seen that prospers the Jews, prospers the Indian community, who are not even Christians. But what they do is they support one another in their community. And everybody knows, you know what, if I need this, I go to this particular person. So that is how they prosper each other. That's how they bless each other, because family, like I said, is your family, but it's also your community. So when you're looking at growing in your financial prosperity, remember that you and your husband working together, you speaking wisdom and blessing to your children, and then you supporting the community that you are. Now, I do want to talk about the difference between saving and investing. This is very key, and I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier. Dan had mentioned, how do I start saving and how much? I always tell people that savings is just putting money aside for a rainy day, right? So the people who saved before this crisis are the people who are in a much better situation than the people who are just spending like things will always be that way. The people who are surviving. I told you earlier about the story of Joseph, right? He actually told the Pharaoh that you needed to store during the times of abundance because famine will happen. We all know that there are seasons in life, just like there's there's night, right? So we know that will happen. Even, here in Kenya, there are rainy seasons, there are dry seasons. So it is not wise to spend everything during the rainy season. And then when it is farming, then you're busy crying. A wise person doesn't do that. A wise person knows that they store for when things will happen, just like we heard about the story in the ant. So usually tell people have an emergency cover between 3 to 6 months. That's typically what I would advise people to do. And I believe that that's a principle that you always have to store for a rainy day. But then now maybe in the future, we'll start looking at up to 12 months, because right now we're realizing things are changing, right? So the key here is whenever you're saving, just put something aside that you need for the short run, but anything extra, you want it to go into investments. Investment is thinking about the long term. And I always talk about long term because I always say you need to be investing not for yourself, but your children's children. You have to be thinking about the first generation. What will bless them? Not necessarily you. What will bless them? Because hopefully you are blessed by your parents and your parents' parents. But if not, we talked about stopping the poverty cycle. So it starts with you. So you need to know the difference between saving and investing. So when you're going to invest in, there are different asset classes, right? So you need to diversify your portfolio. We just talked about the story of Abraham. He started off in business, right? So he started off, he was shown the land, he started the livestock business, and he's doing well. But once he started making money, he started employing people, everything is going great. Guess what? He diversified. He diversified into silver, into gold, into property. So that's what I would actually advise you to do, is that whatever and however you make money and you start on your wealth creation journey, you need to diversify your portfolio. You need to get into real estate. You need to get into businesses. You need to get into equities. Equities just means that you actually own shares into a company. It could either be a public listed company, like if it's listed in Nairobi Securities Exchange, or it could be a private company, right? Most business people actually own maybe 100% of the business if it's a family business. But when it comes to equity, you own a percentage of that company. You just own shares. That's just the difference. And as you grow in your wealth, you realize there are some things you do not want to be there full time. So you're willing to actually own shares in that versus owning the whole company. And that's wisdom. You need to know when to invest and how to invest. And if you don't know, remember I talked about having guidance. The other type of asset class is called fixed income. Fixed income is just you lend and you get an interest. We talked about how in the Bible it says the borrower will always be a slave to the lender. Fixed income just means you're a lender, right? So the government borrows and you lend to it, you get a treasury bond or a treasury bill. A company borrows and you lend to them, it's a corporate bond or a commercial paper. So fixed income just means someone has said, give me this money and I will return this money back with interest. That is how you make money. That is how you make money, that you're able to lend, be a lender, as opposed to be a borrower. And then other ways to invest are through unit trusts. And I usually say this is usually good for people who are just starting out, especially if, for example, your savings, you're not going to like a money market before you go into equity funds or balance funds, because at this time, what you're doing is maybe you don't have a lot of money, and two, you're not very familiar with the market, so you need guidance. So you want to work with professional money managers. If you don't have the information, you always want to go with the professional. So that's what the unit trusts are. And then alternative investments. Alternative investments just means anything outside the ordinary, right? So outside the real estate, the equities, the fixed income, the alternative investments. So once you get to that point, you always want to talk to a wealth advisor who would advise you with that. Now, this to me is really a good table. I always say time is your friend, because if you look at it and you look at compound interest, it will surprise you how wealth can be accumulated and you actually reach financial prosperity. For most people, being a dollar millionaire is financial prosperity, right? And so I just did this chart and I just realized that if you start today and you put aside 50,000 Kenya shillings, or $500 only. In 25 years, you'd have made 100,000 Kenya shillings, which is $1 million, only with $500. So can you imagine if you put in $1,000, and you're getting an interest rate of 12%, guess what? You will earn what's this called again? You will be able to earn, you'll get to $1 million faster. But the key here is always about consistency. Start with what you have in your hands, right? So if today you have 5,000, put that aside. If you have 10,000, put that aside. If you have 1,000 shillings, put that aside. For the people who decided to join this program, I did say that if you start off with 1,000 shillings into a money market, a new one with one of our strategic partners, then we at Regal Africa, we're going to put in 1,000 shillings to back you up, right? We're going to help you start on that creation journey. And the reason I say this is because you need to have an investment account, and you need to be putting aside something every month, just like the ant. You keep accumulating, because it reached a point whereby you will have $1 million and you'll be like, how did I get to $1 million with only 50,000, with only $500? How did I get to $1 million? And the beauty about this is about compound interest, and it's about haba na haba hujaza kibaba. It's all about slow and steady, slow and steady, slow and steady. Now, there are some people who say, you know what, I always recommend for people who have a salary or who are in business, so that way they're able to put money aside, accumulate periodically. But sometimes maybe you are blessed, right? We're talking about financial prosperity and family. Maybe you were blessed and you inherited, right? And you inherited a substantial amount of money, right? Or you actually were in business and you were able to actually do a project where you got a substantial amount of money all at once. And the question is, where do you put that money? I always talk to people about doubling your money. There's a secret rule that the wealthy do use to understand how soon can they double their money, and it's called the rule of 72. And what this does, which is the secret formula, you're able to tell how soon will I be able to double my money. So, for example, if I today was able to inherit 10 million Kenya shillings or $10 million, and I want it to become 20 million, I want to double that money. For me to be able to know how I can do that, I put on the rule of 72. So if I want to double my money within 6 years, then I need to find an investment that will give me at least 12% per annum, so that in 6 years, I double my money. If I want to double my money within 3 years, then I make sure that my return on investment is 24%, so that in 3 years, I would have doubled my money from 10 million to 20 million. Why is this important? It's very important because when you're actually going out there to create wealth, you do not want to be lied to. Some people will lie to you and tell you, you'll make money double your money in 3 months or in 6 months. And you have to ask them, how? How are you going to do that? What kind of interest rate? Is it guaranteed? Is it not guaranteed? Again, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So if you know this and someone tells you, by the way, the return on investment of this is 10% per annum, and then they tell you you're going to double it in 2 years, then you know they are not telling you the truth. So that is what wisdom is. You have to get the knowledge, and the knowledge that the wealthy do use to be able to tell, where do I need to put my money so that I can double it, And wherever you put this money, it's not active. Most people put this money with a professional money manager who will actually help you grow that wealth. So, so that to me is very, very important. I know I have spoken a lot, and there's a lot of information I have shared so far. So what I want to do is just sort of open up the floor to see if any of you have a question, then I can answer. I can answer around why family is important. I can answer about wealth planning. I can answer about accumulation of wealth in regards to periodic investment, and also answer around the banker's rule. Do any of you have any questions? You can unmute yourself, or you can put it on the chat and I can be able to answer that. All right, I see a comment here. Dear Regal Woman, you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. I hope you're learning the whole job. The whole role for this workshop was for you to learn some of the information and really understand what the Bible says about creating wealth. So thank you very much for that compliment. Does anyone else have a question? I can unmute you, and then, or you can unmute yourself, so that then I can go on to the next session, because the next topic I'll be talking about is the Proverbs 31 woman. For anyone who grew up in a Christian household, you always talk about the Proverbs 31 woman. So we'll be talking a little bit about that and how that ties to creating wealth and financial prosperity. Any questions? All right. So if you do not have any questions, then all right. So I see Nyambura, go ahead and ask the question. I'll go ahead and ask to unmute. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Nyambura. What question do you have?
Oh, well, I wanted to go back to the notes on, on savings and investments, and
Yes.
was wondering, when it comes to a balance, assume you do have like a sense of, in terms of percentages, how much money would you need to put into real estate, how much into equities, in terms of percentages, how much to fixed income and unit trust? Would you have a formula for that?
All right, so that's a really good question. For me, those things depend on three things. One, the amount of money that you have, because if you have more money, then you're able to diversify a lot more. Two, it depends on your time horizon, which really depends also on your age, right? So for example, if you're younger, you'll probably be able to put your money in more riskier assets than if you're older, right? So if someone comes to me, they're 20, they're in their 30s, we'll probably be getting them to put money into, into more equities, getting them into real estate because we're thinking long run, Forex market, you put in an emergency fund in like a money market, but that portfolio will be very different from someone who's 60 or 70. Because someone who's 60 and 70, what you're trying to do is manage their wealth, right? You do not want to start putting the money in risky assets that they can lose. Because that person who's 60, 70 is really thinking, how do I transfer this wealth to the next generation, right? So whenever you're looking at a portfolio and how much money to put into that, you want to sit down with somebody because it's very personal. It depends on the money, the time horizon or the person's age, and it also depends on their risk tolerance. So there's no actual formula per se in regards to each person should do that because like I said, it depends on these three critical things. So I would advise you to speak to a wealth advisor and then you can look into that. The only thing I usually tell people is one of the things about being wise is to not put everything in one basket. So you also want to put some money, for example, local investments, especially for right now, because we're in Kenya, we're in Africa, you want to put money here because that's where the great returns are. The world is coming into Africa, but you also want to diversify your money into offshore, so places outside the country. So usually at that time I say between your onshore and offshore, maximum you should invest is 30% into an offshore account, whereby you're investing money usually in dollars or euros or yens or different things like that. It also depends because, for example, if you're saving, for example, for your children, your children want to go to the US or the UK for further studies, it makes no sense for you to be investing that money in Kenya shillings, right? Because that might be eroded because of the currency exchange. So when you're looking at these things, again, it's about sitting down with a professional, understanding your situation and say, these are my intentions. So remember, where you want to go, and then someone can advise you accordingly because it depends on your family situation. All right. I hope I answered that. All right. So then I'll go ahead and Diana, you can ask. I'm unmuting you. You can ask your question.
Hey, I wanted just to piggyback back onto your formula of SBI, salary, business, and investment. Now, I have a question. I mean, considering where we are right now, for example, COVID-19, right? So if you are a business owner right now, it's a little bit more challenging for you to put money aside for investments and so on and so forth. Because if you're a business owner, you have your off seasons, your down seasons, and it's pretty much, it's not a fixed situation where you expect things to stay a certain way. That being said, what would you recommend as a business owner in terms of looking and following up with your financial advisor? Is it something that you think they should be doing like semi-annual, where you look at your books and figure out how much money you can put aside towards investing and to move into the next level? Or, I mean, I know it's relative depending on the person's business, but is there a kind of formula that you do recommend to actually follow so that you're always up to track with your goals?
All right, so this is what I recommend. I always tell people that you want to have an annual review in regards to your finances. So you need to speak to your advisors annually, just because things happen, and then you can see about reviewing that. But remember, when you have a wealth plan, it's not short term, right? It's long term. So you have your 1 year goal, 5 year goals, 20-year goals. So you're thinking long term, but things change. So you always want to meet up with your advisor at least once a year. But the other time also you want to speak to an advisor is when things happen, right? So you get married, you get a divorce, you get children, there's crisis. During that time, you don't want to make decisions, but you want to be able to look at your situation and say, how does this affect my new reality? So for business people right now, again, it depends on business. There's some businesses that are thriving right now because they're in businesses that people really need essential services, right? So people in the healthcare industry are running all the way to the bank. They're happy because they are able to make money at this time. There are certain industries like hospitality where nobody's traveling, nobody's eating out, there's no entertainment, so they are struggling, right? So again, for somebody like that, telling them to save right now won't work because they're not getting any income. But if they had put the right things in place and they had a wealth plan earlier, and they knew that a time would come from abundance to farming season, like now, crisis season, they should have put aside at least 3 to 12 months. So right now, what would they be doing? They would be living off their savings while waiting for the tide to change, or for the seasons to change, right? They'll be waiting for the next seasons of abundance. So that's what I would say. So for somebody who's in business right now, it's really about spending the money and investing in what you need to do. And I say it's about investing in you. That's what I've been saying. It's all about listening, learning, and leveling up. If I was in business right now, I would really be looking at my strategy. I would really be looking and saying, where does my business go from here? Because things have changed, right? So things will not go back to the way they were. So if I was in business, I would actually be spending money in regards to strategy and figuring out what do I need to change in regards to like my business model going forward. So that's what I would do if I was a business person. But in regards to saving, you cannot save 10%. 10% of zero is zero, right? But I'm assuming that you probably would have invested. So this is the time when you look at your investments, and if they're doing well, that's fine. If you need to liquidate, I always say this is the wrong time to liquidate unless you have to. But then that becomes the opportunity for people who've been saving and have money, because this is the opportunity or the time where people will be selling their property at throwaway prices or at a discount. If you had been saving, if you had been diligent and been saving, and then this is the time when you can acquire those assets at a very good price, whether it's in real estate, whether it's in the equity market, whether it's businesses that are looking to sell. So again, it depends on what you are doing in the prior season for you to make sense for the future. But back to the questions, I would say you want to speak to an advisor at least once a year, or when circumstances change in your life, that's when you want to change that. All right, so I will go ahead and talk about what I always say is a woman in the Bible that we, if you are a woman, should be looking, should really look at her story and what the Bible says about that. Earlier I talked about Abraham and what he was, a great businessman. He was the leader of the family. And so when he was doing that, he was running the family business, and then the inheritance went to his children. Now, I always say women in families need to be empowered so that they can support their husband and be a blessing to their children. And so that's why I always talk about the empowered family woman, who to me is the Proverbs 31 woman, because I believe that she's able to achieve the best that she can achieve, create wealth that is promised to her. Wealth is not only promised to the man, wealth is promised to all of us. So I believe that as an empowered family woman, she's able to transform the lives of her family and the community that she serves. God has promised success and prosperity, and so I always say we need to claim it. So in Proverbs 31, it talks about this woman. She's a virtuous woman, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's an investor, she's a philanthropist, she's a businesswoman. But I can tell you this, that even when I was growing up, a lot of people were really talking about her being a wife, her being a mother. But when I read it when I was older and I started really looking at her, I realized what made her different was not because she was a mother. There are many mothers. Not because she was a wife. There are many wives. Not because of what she was or what society says women should be, but what made her stand out was the fact that she did what she did, right? She was able to be an investor, right? And she worked with her husband, because if you see later on, her husband was really proud about her. Maybe actually what I should do is actually read that because it's in Proverbs 31 from 10, and it talks about, and I'll take this real quick, it talks about a wife of noble character who can find. So she's very precious. She's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. So she's very hardworking. She's like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. So she was in global trade. Yes, she was in global trade. She provides food for her family and potions for her servant girls. So she was a leader in her home. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earning, she plants a vineyard. So she was an investor. She was not waiting for handouts from her husband or for the community. She was busy working. She was busy trading and investing. It says in verse 7 that she sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that she's trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hands, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. All right. And it goes on, and it actually talks about her, for example, in verse 22, she makes covering for her bed. So she's very industrious and doing things for herself. She's clothed in fine linen and purple. So even though she's hardworking, she takes care of herself, right? Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. And it goes on and on about this virtuous woman. And it talks about how charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And the reason, like I said, this all ties down to financial prosperity is because an empowered woman is able to bring the family together. You can see her husband was proud. Her children look up to her. Her servants, her employees look up to her and what she's doing. She's making money. She's investing. So she's supporting a lot of people and she's profitable. And her lamp does not go out at night. So this is very critical when you're looking into financial prosperity, because I believe when you want to be prosperous, you don't look at other people. This is between you, your God, and your family, and you do your best. So I always say the Bible encourages us to think abundance, like she was thinking, to work hard. It's important to work hard. It's important to create wealth, and you need to get wisdom and understanding. So I believe that this empowered woman was able to get wisdom and understanding in what was going on in her community at the time. And so she knew when to do what. She knew when to trade. She knew when to invest. She knew when to be a mother. She knew when to be a wife. And all this led her to be prosperous and to become known as that virtuous woman that would be able to support her community. And so with that, one of the key things about being financially prosperous really is about business, right? So we've talked about Abraham and his business and becoming an investor. You look at the Proverbs that one woman shows in business, and then she's also investing, because from her profits, from her business profits is what she used to invest. So for you to get to be an investor, you need to have to be in business, or you need to have a salary. But business is where you get the profits for you to start investing. So it is very key that when you're on this journey of financial prosperity is to say, what do I need to do in my business so that I become successful? And I always say it starts by building a good foundation. You need to have vision. Just like you have personal vision, you have a business vision. You need to pray about it. You need to say, God, is this the right path that I should take? And then you really need to work very hard, right? Because what you're trying to do is create value. People will pay for what is valuable to them. And sometimes you might be creating something of value, but people are not paying because they don't see it. Again, what the wealthy value is very different from what the poor people value. The wealthy value insights, they value knowledge, they value relationships, they value money, because they know money is an enabler. Versus the poor people don't value that. They're probably just valuing showing off. They're probably valuing just day-to-day things. They probably are lazy. They don't want to work. So again, what you value determines where you go in life. But in business, and if you want to have a successful business, you have to have a plan. And we talked about what God says about having a plan. You need to manage, right? You need to manage that. And financial management is key, because you have to keep track of what you're doing and to be effective and efficient in managing that business. And then you need to analyze. There's something about reflection. When you reflect, see things in the past, you're able to make better decisions for the future. So for you to actually take things to the next level, you need to plan, manage, and analyze your business, and that will ensure that you become successful. Now, when we are still on the topic about business, I always tell people in business, you need capital, and there are different types of capital, but I'll break it down to just 4. The first one is social capital, right? So in regards to social capital, you really have to find the right people in your networks, right? Your networks is your net worth, right? Who influencing you is very important. A wealthy person or a person who has knowledge will direct you in the right direction. The person, if you're being influenced the wrong direction, guess what? You will go into the wrong direction and you will not be prosperous financially. So you have to be very careful who is in your network. I actually believe you'd rather have no one in your network than the wrong people in your network, right? Because if you cannot find the right people in your network, it's going to affect you. Your environment affects who you are, right? So if you even talk about even in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, what was happening? Even if you're a good person, you become bad because you're in that particular situation. But if you go into a situation whereby people are good, then you become good. So what I'm saying here with social capital, you have to find who will influence you to do good. Who is speaking life into you or into your family or into your community? That is who you want to associate yourself with. Are they giving you the right information? But one of the things I have to say with social capital, you have to be very careful, because wealth brings many friends and a poor man has no friends. So you also have to be careful that the people you bring in your cycle are not just taking from you, but they're also giving back to you. So you have to be very careful about that. And I also believe that your social capital, the people who are in your corner or who you work with, you're able to benefit from one another, right? This is not in the Bible, but it's in reality. If you look at what the Jews do, they're always about community and they support one another. And if one person wants something, they just ask in the community and someone will be able to support them. Again, it's about networks. It's about networks. So surround yourself with the right people, because that social capital will be very important when you're growing your business. If you want people to know what it is that you're doing. Your social capital can be able to tell them what it is that you're doing. They probably will be able to support you, or they'll be able to tell you, this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you need to do. And you need that in order for you to become wealthy. The second thing is about financial capital. This is the money you have in your hand or in your bank. Again, the only way you get money is by working very hard. You have to actually work so that you can actually get an income, be it your salary, be it business profit, or investment income. So that is very important. And having, I always tell people, especially at a time like this in crisis, cash is king. One of the things a lot of people think is financial prosperity, but it's actually not really prosperity, is really what I have seen people misconstruing about, for example, property. A lot of people are asset rich, but cash poor. So what it is they have all these assets, all this land, all this gold, all this silver, but they don't live a happy life, right? They don't have the lifestyle that they want. They cannot pay their medical bills. Why? Because they have assets, but they're cash poor and they're miserable, right? And you ask them, why did you accumulate all of this if you are not going to use it, right? And that's very, and that is why you need, I always tell people, you have to look at the Bible, because, you know, there are times when you will have that money and it can't do anything for you, or that particular asset. So the asset of the money is important for that particular situation. If you look at the story of Joseph, and when he was in Pharaoh's palace, and he was, his brothers came from Canaan, and they had silver, they had money. What they did not have is food, right? And I think for me, it's very clear whereby it shows sometimes money is not everything, because they had money, but they didn't have food. The person who had food was the person who had power at this time, which were the people who had actually stored the food in Egypt. So there always has to be a balance. You actually have to have a balance. You want to have money, but you also want to have assets. But the worst thing you can do is to be asset rich and cash poor. So in regards to financial prosperity, you always want to have a balance here. The third thing, or the type of capital you need to be looking at, is knowledge, right? Which is wisdom and education, so that you can use to create value. If you look at the richest man in the Bible, who was Solomon, son of King David, when he was asked what he wants, he said he wanted wisdom, and God gave him wisdom. And from that wisdom, he was the wealthiest man in the world. And I don't think anyone has ever been more richer or wealthier than King Solomon. And that's because he had wisdom. But wisdom is not enough. You actually have to create value from the knowledge that you have, so that people can buy the goods or services that you are providing. But this is something that you need to be aware of and ask yourself, what do I have in my hand? Is it knowledge capital? Then use that to create value. And then the last one is basically investment capital. This is where you're supposed to work towards owning property, owning assets, right? Which, like you saw in the story of Abraham, whereby he moved from just business profit to silver, gold, and property. Something like property is true and tested. So that's where you want to be. But sometimes I tell people, especially young people, it doesn't make sense for you to have property and no cash, right? So you see all these people going in, taking loans to buy property, and then they lose them because they didn't understand the system of how you want to do things. So you want to start off with liquid assets, and then you go on to different asset classes. So there's a system about this, but ultimately what you want to do is own assets which are true and tested, so that you can be able to be prosperous. Let's say, for example, property is very, it's the smartest way for you to invest in, because you can live there, you can work there, you can rent and get money, you can farm and get money. The property appreciates in value depending on the location. You can use it as collateral, right? But even when you're looking at this, if you're living somewhere, you're not making money out of it. If you're working somewhere in that property, you're not making money out of it. You're renting somewhere, you cannot live there also. So again, when you're looking at property, you actually have to ask yourself, what is it that I want out of this property? And then use it to be able to get you to achieve it. If it is appreciation in value that you want, great. Then you can just buy land and you can do that. If it's cash which you need, which cash flow is king, then now you need to do things about, can I rent this? Can I farm here? Because what I see is I see a lot of people who have land and they're doing nothing with it. So for me, I say, either sell it or do productivity in it. But that's something we can talk about. And with that, we'll be talking now about multifamily. Remember, this is about faith, family, and financial prosperity. I can tell you about the wealthy of the wealthy. They do things as family. They do things as family, and they always have a system about how this is done. And at the core is really financial planning. They're like, okay, this is the family estate. What do we do around it, right? They also look at and say, okay, these are the different asset classes, who can help us manage it? So they get professionals to help them manage it. They also actually have property advisors. When do I buy? When do I sell, right? Because people just don't buy property and keep it for centuries, because that property is an asset. What can you do with it? So property advisory is something that they look at. Philanthropical management. Again, what is it you want to be known for in your family, right? What good work do you want to do in your family? For example, in my case, in my family, my parents and my grandparents were really big around the church. So if you look at the area where my grandparents are from, which is Kirinaga, they built a lot of churches, they supported a lot of church programs, a lot of schools. So that is what the family was known for in regards to doing God's work, mission work, and the church. So again, as a family, you have to come together and say, what do we want to be known for? What kind of lifestyle do I want to live? Because I believe that if you work very hard and you create wealth, there's a certain lifestyle that you want to live. So what kind of lifestyle is that? And how do you manage your cash flow? Families also look at strategy and they say, okay, we need a plan, our estate. How are we going to transfer wealth? So even when you're going through financial prosperity, you have to say, you know what, there needs to be a time when I won't be here. How do I transfer that to the next generation? And what kind of advice do I get from there? And the most important thing that I think that has been missing, which I would encourage all of you to do, is actually financial training and education for your children and your children's children. Because if you do not train a child of the way to go, they're going to do other things that you don't want them to do. So you want to make sure that they have education and understand money so that they can continue building wealth as opposed to using and misusing it. Governance is also very important. God is a God of order. And also when you're doing things in your family or in business, you want to have order. These are the structures. This is what we do. This is how administration is done in the family business, in the family estate. Keeping records. These things are very important, and ultimately getting the right advisors are important, especially around risk, around asset protection, compliance with the laws of the land, tax advisory is very key. And so this is a bit formal, but this is what the wealthy of the wealthy do. So I believe that this is something that you need to learn to do so that it helps you and your family. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about really around faith, family, and financial prosperity is really the wealth cycle, the wealth circle. The first thing when you're creating wealth is really around accumulation. So when people are starting out, it's around wealth accumulation. Then once you accumulate wealth, you're able then now to manage the wealth, right? So wealthy people, you see them talking about wealth management. But after that, it's about wealth transfer. But I always tell people that once you transfer the wealth, you need to teach your children to keep building, to keep growing, to keep creating wealth. Because if they don't do that, then guess what? They will eventually deplete the wealth that was created. As you can see, if you start from a perspective of I'm creating this wealth for me and my children and my children's children, and you teach that to your children, even when your children inherit, they'll keep building. But if you do it, this is what I'm doing for me, and you don't teach that to your children, when they get it, they'll spend it. And so when they spend it, by the time it goes to their children, they have nothing. And then their children start from scratch, which is not what God has said that we need to do. So we always need to be teaching our children to keep building, to keep growing, and keep creating wealth. I always say we all work hard, we want to grow our wealth. And when we transfer it, we need to start thinking what I call the legacy of wealth, which is the money that you have. How will this be transferred? But also legacy of purpose, which is impact. I alluded to it again around my family and what they have done in the past. And because I saw that happen in my family, even I support the church in the way that I can. And so also you in your family, you have to ask yourself, what is the legacy of purpose? What will I be known for? What will my family be known for? And if it hasn't happened in the past, then it should start with you. Because the way you have financial prosperity, the way you create wealth is because people will support you and what you do, and God will bless you if you ask for it. So remember, you want to have a legacy of wealth and a legacy of purpose. And so with that, I will end with about financial prosperity before I now answer questions about money, because I know you might have more questions. When we started this program, we talked about faith, family, and financial prosperity. And we said faith is being sure of what we hope for certain, and what we do not see. Again, have faith that you will be financially prosperous, and have hope. You might not, it's not there in reality, but it will happen. So I always say you cannot be afraid. You need to move away from fear. A lot of us fear failure. A lot of us fear success. You have to have faith that it will happen. You have to go forth and be who God called you to be. We talked about purpose. We talked about your assignment. What is that? And I believe once you know what your purpose is, what your assignment is, and you go forth and be who God called you to be, and that is when you'll have favor, you'll have faith, and you'll be prosperous, which ultimately is the goal that we're all trying to seek, right? How do we be prosperous? And so there are a few Bible verses here that I really wanted to share, because this was all about the biblical principles about creating wealth and being financially prosperous. Proverbs, which is a book that I would encourage all of you to read, really talks about being prudent and being a wise person. This is very critical on your wealth creation journey and for you to be prosperous. The other thing it talks about is the diligent will rule. You have to be diligent in the work that you do. If you're diligent, then you will rule. And if you rule, then you will be successful financially. You also talk about on Proverbs 21, you talk about the wise have wealth and fools spend all they have. Again, it goes back to what we talked about, saving for a rainy day and investing for the future. The wise have wealth, and wealth is accumulated incrementally over time. But fools spend it all. Immediately they get money, they want to spend it all. They want to show that they have money. They're all over the place spending money that is not necessary. Spend money wisely, invest wisely, save for a rainy day. And that's what the Bible tells you about that. But in Romans 8, it just talks about how all things work for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So I believe that if you have faith, if you are working according to God's purpose and you're doing the assignment that you're called to do in this world, you will be successful. You will be successful. Whatever success looks like to you. My success is very different from your success. So remember that what you want is the success or the financial prosperity that is for you. Not for other people, for you. Because what is successful for me, what success is for me is different from what success is for you. And in Matthew, it talks about building a good foundation. And building a good foundation for me is really understanding where you are, understanding what God says about wealth, and then building from there. Because if you do not build on a good foundation, then guess what? It will not be able to last the test of time, right? So you always have to build a good foundation, right? So in regards to finance specifically and money, you actually have to have your liquid assets, so a rainy day assets, and then you need to diversify your investment portfolio so that you can have wealth that will grow, and that then will, you will be able to leave an inheritance for the next generation. And I'll end with Deuteronomy 8:18 that says, "But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as is it today." So God will give you the ability to produce wealth. He swore to your ancestors, and it will happen for you today. So if you have faith, if you believe that it will happen, then it will happen. And so for me, I wish you all the best. I wish you prosperity in your family, financial prosperity, and I know that you will be able to achieve that which you have proven you want to achieve. So with that, I will go ahead and just take the time to answer any questions around faith. I will answer questions around family and how family helps you in your journey of financial prosperity. And I can then also answer questions around financial prosperity and what that means to you. Because remember, we are not of the world, so financial prosperity is personal, right? What is financial prosperity for you? And really answer your questions about how all these three things tie, because I do believe that they tie, and the word says that clearly in the Bible. So with that, I'll go ahead and just open the floor so that if anyone has any questions, I can then go ahead and answer that. All right, so let me go ahead and unmute. All right, so Diana, you have a question?
Actually, I have a comment, and I'll just say this has been very amazing, very inspiring, very eye-opening in terms of how we look at financial wellness, if I should say, and financial prosperity and creating generational wealth. So I would say thank you for an awesome presentation. That being said, I'll be working on my workbook, my wealth book, and as of right now, I'll have to give me a moment. I'm still trying to think of what questions I may have.
All right, thank you very much. The whole purpose of this program or this workshop is just to share information that I believe that you then need to take in and pray about it to give you direction. But ultimately, what I do believe that you need is to actually sit down with a wealth advisor who can work with you on the actual steps that will take you to financial prosperity. But remember, you actually have to have a vision for you to achieve what it is that you want to achieve, because you then need to then take the steps that you need to then achieve financial prosperity. So I'm glad you learned something, and I wish you all the best on your financial journey. All right, thank you, Diana. So do we have another question? I see a comment here from Nyokabi who says, very appropriate and insightful. Thank you very much. Great. I hope you learned something. That's the essence of this program. And I wish you all the best. Any other questions? All right. I see another question here from Nyambura. Go ahead and ask the question.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so basically, I was listening to you about the percentages, and you said that dependent on your risk profile and the time horizon, different asset classes like the ones you had mentioned on real estate, equities, fixed income, and unit trusts and alternative investments depends on many things. For me, I'd like to just ask this in terms of family generations. A lot of us as Africans have been thinking that when you buy a moroda or a land or a shamba, if you call it, that you have ultimately reached the pinnacle of success as a person. And you think that that on its own is good enough retirement investment for you or for your generation thereafter in terms of legacy building. My question is, now that COVID has happened and it is a global situation, where in the next 5 years, we seem to be changing tax on what is investment, what should we put our money in. I would want you to shed a bit of light to tell us at least 3 to 5 places where you think, as young women and as women in their 40s going to yearn in years, not even earning years, because now retrenchment pay cuts, people are actually losing jobs. What do you see as the best asset classes to put your money in and then moving forward?
Okay. All right. So that's a good question. And the thing about, and I'll start off by saying, even as things change, things stay the same, right? So I talked about earlier about the Bible and what it says about creating wealth, and really property and business is really key. So that doesn't change, but it's how we do it. So you just mentioned about owning land was the pinnacle of success, which it still is. The problem or the challenge is, what are you doing with that land? So if you see historically, people just bought land or plots of small sizes, plots of land, and they kept it there waiting for it to double. Currently, I can tell you the prices of land the land is overvalued. So you will not see that happening or the value doubling anytime soon. It's going to happen probably in the next 10, 20 years, right? Once people and their salary or their income increases for them to be able to actually purchase this land at that value. So that era of land, just basic plots of land without productivity, ran for 10, 20 years, right? That part is gone. That I believe that is gone. What now you want to see happening is, in the next decade or so, is the productivity of land, right? So I believe the people who will actually benefit are people who are in this. So the 3 places that I've been telling people that I think where people should be investing is agribusiness. And when we talk about agribusiness, we're talking about agriculture, which is the productivity of land, but also the processing of the products, the agricultural products, and the whole value chain from packaging to designing to brands of these things. So what will change now is 2 things. One, people will actually continue to own the physical asset. So in this case, you own the farm, right? So that will be good. You will produce, which is the right thing to do. You'll be able to sell and make a profit. That's one thing. But the trend that is coming, which I foresee, and I would really like to work on that, is where you will actually see people owning land, but not necessarily by themselves, but collectively. So you'll find that people will come together, buy land, large acres of land, and then do the farming through professional farm managers, professional farm operators. So you'll own a piece of the pie, which will then mean that you're still investing in a true and tested asset class, but then now you will not necessarily be the one doing the farming, but that somebody professional will be doing. And so that is now going to be what is considered a financial asset. So you slowly start seeing people moving from just physical assets, which is my title, to financial assets, which is an asset by its underlying asset will be able to give you good returns. So that to me is what I think is the future. The same thing will happen in real estate also. So again, you want to own property, you want to be able to get rental income, which is great, true and tested. But as you can see, even with this crisis, people are saying, you know what, rental income is not guaranteed because people are not paying. Right? Or if you're in commercial property, people are not going to take up these office spaces because they've learned they can work from home. So there'll be a little bit of change in real estate. But the people who I believe will prosper are people who invest in real estate, but again, through professional real estate managers or property owners, because then they will get a professional to deal with that, but they'll be getting the return of the rental income. So I believe that, again, people will still make money through land, through the productivity of land, of agribusiness or real estate. It will just be done differently, using professionals and using technology, which means I could be anywhere in the world. I could be in India, I could be in China, I could be in Australia, but I can still own land or property in Kenya or in Ghana or in Nigeria. So that's what's going to change from just predominantly physical assets to financial assets. Again, when it comes to land, what I would like to see and what I think the Bible actually talks about is less of subdivision to very small pieces of land, but coming together as a family and doing things collectively that will bless everybody, right? Because I believe someone who will produce from 1 acre of land is less productive than someone who has 10 acres of land. And because we cannot all own 10 acres of land, we can come as 10 people in the family and each has 1 acre and we do it collectively. So that to me is what's going to change in the future. And I would like people to look at that. So young people, what I believe and what I'm encouraging people to do is to look at their families and say, what can we do collectively? And I think that that responsibility lies solely with the parents and how they raise their children. Because if they raise their children and say, we are family, and this is our core unit in how we approach the world, in the things that we do, then we will see prosperity that way in the family unit. But I know it's not easy. So for those who cannot do it with their family, then I keep reminding people, young people or whatever age, to find people, like-minded people, and they will do things collectively. Because I believe collaboration and collective investment will be the future. And that's how people will get financial prosperity. But it will have to be done in the right way, the right structures, legal, so that people cannot take advantage of other people. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did.
Yes, okay, great. All right. It looks like we're about almost out of time before I make my last comment. So I'll just go ahead and unmute. So Diana, you can go ahead and answer your question. Diana, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry about that. Actually, my question was going to be around when you were talking about periodic in investing, and I did like the graph that you actually broke it down based on how much you plan on investing, and how if you put like X amount of dollars in a matter of 10 to 25 years, it can grow. Now, that being said, right now I do know the trajectory that you're looking at this table was at 12%, give or take what it is currently. But considering with the market, it could go up and down and stuff. So, but what would you look at the trajectory in terms of the balance between doing like fixed income, equities in the next 5 to 10 years, based on what's going on in the global economy? Could you give some insight around that?
Okay, so I'll answer this question twofold. So the first one was about the periodic thing. So periodic investment, as you saw it, we were showing basically if you invest a certain amount for a certain amount of years. We do know in life things change. So what you earn at 20 is not what you'll earn at 30, what you'll earn at 40, what you'll earn at 50. So this is just average about how much you will earn, right? And I always say that the more money you make, the more money you should save and invest, right? So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. Also, when it comes to rate of return, in this case, we're using 12% per annum, but it is true there are some years that you're going to make 8%, other year you make 20%. So this is just average within your investment period, how much money you'd make. But if you want to know exact, then that's when now you actually have to sit down with a professional who can work out the numbers. But because the future, no one can tell the future, we actually use approximation. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. In regards to what asset classes, sorry, you'd like to invest in, if you look at, we always say that the past doesn't mean that's what's going to happen in the future, but it's a good indicator, right? So if you look at historically, equities have overperformed majority of the asset classes and also real estate, right? So you want to continuously increase your asset allocation in those two asset classes. Fixed income is just really more for people who are conservative or people who are older, right? And the reason that is because you then are guaranteed a certain amount of interest return for that period of time. In Kenya, the last 5 years, historically, the returns have been really good for fixed income, but who knows what the future is? Because you can only tell the return of fixed income for that period that you fixed the investment. But in regards to equities, if you look at it from beginning in the stock market, people who started at a particular point of time, over time, they've outperformed all other asset classes. And if it comes to real estate, again, it's about location, and also timing. So real estate is a good asset class, but the trends that we've seen happening or going forward, because the value of property is overpriced, in this case, Kenya, then you'll start seeing them either stabilizing or going down in majority of the urban places. But then the other locations which are going to continue coming up, new cities, then now that is where the opportunity lies. But then now you have to start thinking long term as opposed to thinking short term. All right? All right. So with that, I see here Nyambura says, thank you, Anne, for all your real estate solutions. Kindly contact Nyambura Mahia, Executive Director at Swans Green Limited. All right, Nyambura. So Nyambura is a real estate professional and definitely will be able to share your contact with any of our clients who are interested in real estate solutions. So with that, I will just say that I believe that you harvest what you sow, what you plant, you reap what you sow. So you have to be very intentional in life in what it is that you want to achieve. So if you want financial prosperity, you actually have to focus on that. What do I need to do to be financially prosperous? What do I need to do to achieve financial freedom? What do I need to do to be wealthy? And so I talked earlier about the secret formula of the wealthy, or the wealth formula. So that is what I believe that you need to really focus on. It will not happen right away. It will happen in time. It might not even happen in your generation. It probably will happen in your children's generation. But you can always have the vision and work towards that, because whatever you plant is whatever you will harvest. And if you believe the word of God, God says that if you do good, you will be blessed. And if you are diligent, you will be blessed. If you do the right things at the right time, you will be blessed. And so I believe that, and that's why I believe that all of you need to have faith that it will happen. But for you to actualize that to happen, then you actually have to do the work. And I believe the secret here is your family. Your family is the core unit that will either make you or break you. So you need to continue building those strong family ties, because I believe together people will then be able to prosper together. And at the end of it all, I say, before you make any decisions in regards to investing or anything in regards to business, you want to pray about it, because I believe then you will be able to learn what it is God has called you to do, because remember, you will become wealthy if you're working on your purpose and on your assignment. And with that, I will say thank you very much for joining the Faith, Family, and Financial Prosperity Workshop. It was very interesting today, and the questions that you asked, and I hope that you were blessed and that you will continue to work on your financial journey towards financial prosperity. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.